As the king and queen leave the thrones and head for the exit of Westminster Abbey of the coronation ceremony, you'll see that everyone bows and curtsies to the king, and no one moves a limb, a muscle, when Camilla passes.
The change took less than a minute, but its message could not have been more devastating. Inside Kensington Palace, Princess Catherine reviewed her official royal calendar, reached for a pen, and removed every joint appearance involving Queen Camilla. There was no public warning, no ceremonial announcement, and no opportunity for negotiation. By the time the Queen Consort learned what had happened, the decision had already traveled through the royal household, and the silence surrounding it felt more dangerous than any public accusation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine kept her eyes on the page. Her official royal calendar, the working schedule used by her household to organize public duties, carried 3 appearances: a palace reception, a women's literacy event, and a charitable foundation gathering. Each one had been planned to show unity. Each one now felt like a warning. She drew a firm line through Camilla's name, then turned to her private secretary and said, "These appearances will proceed without her." The princess did not sound triumphant. Anger tightened her voice, but sadness sat beneath it. She had spent years protecting peace for Charles and William, believing patience could hold the family together. Now that patience had become a burden. Removing the Queen Consort was not a scheduling change. It was an admission that the relationship had broken badly enough to threaten the work itself. Camilla received the revised schedule during her morning briefing. She scanned the first page, paused, then looked again. The empty spaces spoke before the aide could. Her name had disappeared from all 3 engagements, and no replacement dates had been offered. "Read it again," she said, forcing calm into her words. The aide obeyed, but the second reading only made the humiliation sharper. The queen understood immediately. This was connected to the palace reception held days earlier, where one tense exchange had crossed a line no statement dared mention. She knew Catherine had not acted on impulse. Someone had reviewed every appearance, every responsibility and contact, and then closed the door. William had known his wife was considering a boundary, but even the prince had not expected the cut to be this complete. When he saw the altered calendar, he said nothing at first. The future king understood that 3 removed names could become a family crisis before lunch. Camilla requested a private meeting before noon. Catherine accepted the meeting, but refused to restore a single appointment beforehand. The calendar had exposed the fracture, but the real danger lay in what each woman believed she was protecting, and what both were now prepared to lose. To the outside world, Catherine and Camilla had stood beneath the same palace balconies, attended the same ceremonies, and served the same crown. Behind those carefully arranged appearances, however, both women carried very different ideas about duty. One had spent years preparing for the future. The other had fought for decades to secure her place in the present. Now, with 3 calendar entries erased, those 2 visions of royal service were colliding at the worst possible moment. Catherine believed every royal appearance was a promise to the public. An official engagement, a scheduled duty carried out on behalf of the monarchy, was never just a date on paper. It carried trust, responsibility, and the reputation of the crown. For her, every person attached to that work had to strengthen its purpose. Private rank could never become more important than public service. Camilla saw the matter differently. Joint appearances beside Catherine confirmed that her place next to Charles still carried weight, as William and his wife moved closer to the center of royal life. Losing those engagements did not feel like a simple change. To the Queen Consort, it felt like a public sign that the future was beginning to move around her. William found Catherine alone with the original schedule still in her hands. The prince studied her face before asking whether she was certain. She admitted that removing Camilla had hurt more than she expected, but leaving her in place would have meant accepting conduct she believed had crossed a serious boundary. Silence, she said, would have made her part of it. Catherine feared more than embarrassment. She feared that allowing one private interference to stand would invite another, until her office no longer controlled the work carrying her name. William understood the danger. He also understood the cost. Charles would soon be forced to choose between defending his wife and protecting the princess's authority over her own household. Camilla felt the humiliation before she could explain it. The decision had not come from the king, the prince, or a senior palace committee, a group of experienced officials who advise on major household matters. It had come directly from Catherine, the woman whose influence was growing with every public appearance. Charles noticed Camilla's hands trembling during breakfast. The king asked what had happened, but she only placed the revised diary beside him. For several seconds, she could not describe the insult she felt. He read the missing engagements once, then again, and his expression hardened. A senior courtier later confirmed, through a documented internal briefing, that Catherine's staff had prepared replacement plans before Camilla was informed. The decision had been measured, not impulsive. Then Charles requested the original calendar and noticed 4 handwritten words beside one cancelled event: the reception incident. That single reference pulled the family toward the moment when courtesy ended. Trust broke, and Catherine decided she could no longer look away. The removal had not begun with a diary, a secretary, or a scheduling dispute. It began 5 nights earlier, during a private reception at St. James's Palace, when one sentence cut through years of carefully maintained royal cooperation. Catherine had entered the evening expecting formality. Camilla had expected obedience. Yet when the Queen Consort questioned the princess's authority in front of senior charity representatives, the room fell silent, and everyone present understood that something far more serious than wounded pride had just been unleashed. Catherine had spent months preparing the program. The reception was designed to coordinate the next stage of royal charity work involving children, families, and early development. St. James's Palace, one of the monarchy's working royal buildings, often hosts official meetings and receptions where major duties are planned. Her office had created the agenda, contacted the organizations, and shaped every promise being made that evening. Camilla arrived with a different expectation. The Queen believed her senior position meant she should preside over the entire program, even though Catherine's team had built it from the beginning. At first, the disagreement remained hidden beneath polite words. Then the princess began explaining the next phase of the initiative, and the fragile calm broke. Camilla interrupted her before she could finish. In front of the charity representatives, she declared that no future royal program should be announced without approval from the Queen's office. That office meant the staff and advisors responsible for supporting her official work. The sentence sounded controlled, but its meaning was brutal. Catherine's authority could be overruled at any moment. Catherine slowly closed the presentation folder and looked directly at her. The princess answered that the initiative belonged to her office and carried William's full support. Her voice remained calm, yet the wound was immediate. The people watching had worked under her leadership for months, and Camilla had challenged that leadership in front of them all. Camilla heard defiance rather than explanation. The Queen saw Catherine's reply as a public refusal to recognize her seniority, and she left the reception convinced the insult had been deliberate. But her anger did not end when the guests departed. Camilla later instructed an aide to move one of Catherine's upcoming events under her own office's supervision. She gave the order in a recorded internal conversation, never consulting the princess. By morning, the attempted change had created 2 versions of the same schedule. Catherine's private secretary placed both versions before her. William stood nearby as she compared them in silence. The prince watched her expression harden, then heard the sentence that changed everything. "This is no longer about manners. It is about control." Catherine did not confront Camilla that morning. Instead, she reviewed every shared engagement and prepared the decision that would shock the household days later. But once the names had been erased, and the hidden interference exposed, avoiding confrontation was no longer possible, and Camilla was already on her way to demand answers. When Camilla entered the private sitting room at Kensington Palace, no aides followed her inside. Catherine was already waiting. Between them rested the revised royal calendar, its empty spaces carrying more weight than any spoken accusation. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Then Camilla asked the question that had consumed her since morning. "By what authority did you remove me?" Catherine's answer would turn a scheduling dispute into a direct battle over the future of the monarchy. Camilla expected an apology. She believed the meeting would end with her appearances restored, and Catherine forced to accept that she had stepped beyond the limits of her position. The royal household meant the staff and offices that organize each senior royal's duties, and the Queen saw herself as the highest-ranking woman within that structure. To her, the calendar change was not only insulting, it was an open challenge. Catherine came prepared for something else. The princess had decided that her own office would no longer surrender control over programs it had created, funded, and managed. She knew the argument was no longer about one reception. It was about whether her work could be changed behind her back, whenever Camilla felt entitled to intervene. Camilla placed the revised diary on the table and demanded that her name be restored before the palace briefing began. She spoke slowly, as though the order should be enough. Catherine refused. The Queen Consort had tried to seize control of an engagement built by the princess's team, then embarrassed her before charity representatives who had trusted her leadership for months. Camilla's anger sharpened. She accused Catherine of using William's future position to weaken the current reign. The words struck hard, because the princess believed she had supported Charles through every difficult transition. She had stood beside the king, protected family unity, and avoided public conflict. Yet now that loyalty was being turned against her. Catherine's voice trembled for a moment, but she steadied it. She would not allow loyalty to Charles to be confused with submission to his wife. The distinction was brutal, and both women understood it. Camilla then revealed through their private conversation that Charles had encouraged greater coordination between the two offices. She believed that instruction justified her intervention. Catherine reached for a private note from the king and placed it between them. His words were clear. Cooperation had been requested, not control. Camilla's strongest defense collapsed. She pushed her chair back and stood, warning that this decision would divide the family. Catherine remained seated. "The division began before the calendar changed," she replied. Camilla left and went straight to Charles, convinced he would reverse everything. But William was already speaking to his father. The confrontation had settled nothing, because the final weight of the decision now rested with two men caught between marriage, inheritance, and the survival of royal authority. Charles had faced constitutional briefings, family departures, public criticism, and the crushing inheritance of the crown. Yet the file before him carried a different kind of danger. On one side stood Camilla, the woman he had defended through years of hostility. On the other stood William and Catherine, the couple expected to carry the monarchy into its next era. Whatever he decided would not remain a private family judgment. It would reveal where power truly rested, and whose authority the king was prepared to protect. Charles understood the limits of his power as clearly as its reach. He could demand calm, call for reconciliation, and shape the conduct of the wider royal family. But Catherine controlled the invitations and appearances within programs managed by her own household. A royal household meant the private staff and office responsible for arranging one senior royal's official duties. Overriding her would not simply settle an argument. It would weaken the structure that allowed each office to function. William made that point without raising his voice. The prince warned that forcing Camilla back onto the calendar would humiliate his wife and tell every palace employee that Catherine's authority could be ignored. He said the monarchy could not preach duty in public while allowing one office to overrule another in private. Charles read the original schedule, the altered version, and the note he had written days earlier. The king removed his glasses and placed them beside the file. For nearly a minute, he said nothing. The silence pressed against everyone in the room because his next words would reach far beyond the people standing before him. Camilla broke first. She told Charles that failing to defend her would make her appear powerless before the entire household. The Queen reminded him how long she had endured public hostility and how often he had promised she would never again be left exposed. William answered with care, but he did not retreat. The future king said the crisis was not about protecting appearances. It was about stopping Camilla's office from quietly taking control of work that belonged to Catherine. Charles then received the most damaging detail through a documented palace briefing. Camilla's staff had contacted an event organizer directly and suggested reducing Catherine's role at the literacy engagement. The king read that passage twice. A senior advisor warned that reversing the removal could push Catherine to withdraw from the event altogether. That would turn a hidden family dispute into a public scandal. Charles finally made his decision. He would not order Catherine to restore Camilla. Each royal household would retain control over its own official program. William did not celebrate. He saw the pain in his father's face and understood what the ruling had cost the king's marriage. Camilla heard the decision without protest. Then she asked one cold question: "Which of my duties remain untouched?" The king had declined to overturn the calendar, but the consequences were only beginning, and Camilla was about to discover how quickly one exclusion could spread. The first consequence appeared beneath the chandeliers of a palace reception room, where staff had prepared 4 prominent chairs for the senior royals expected to attend. By afternoon, one chair had been quietly removed. Camilla's place card disappeared with it. Nothing was announced, yet every aide noticed the widened space between Charles and Catherine. For the Queen Consort, the reality of the decision was no longer confined to a revised document. It had become an absence everyone could see. Catherine proceeded with the reception under her own leadership, while William remained beside her and Charles continued with a separate commitment elsewhere. The event mattered because it had been designed to prove that the family could still work with discipline despite the growing strain behind closed doors. A royal reception was a formal gathering held to support official causes, strengthen partnerships, and show continuity. This one now carried the weight of a family fracture. Camilla's office received formal confirmation that she would no longer attend. Her independent engagements remained unchanged, but that did little to soften the blow. The Queen dressed for the evening anyway, holding on to the possibility that Charles might intervene before the final guest list was confirmed. Camilla waited until an aide entered and quietly told her the decision had not changed. She removed her brooch slowly, placed it aside, and sat down at the dressing table. The Queen Consort felt publicly diminished and privately abandoned. In her mind, the king had protected palace procedure while leaving his wife to absorb the humiliation alone. Catherine felt no victory when she arrived. The princess saw the missing chair and paused. She understood why the boundary had been necessary, but she could also see its human cost. Success surrounded her that evening, yet suffering followed every step. William noticed the hesitation. The prince asked whether she regretted what she had done. Catherine answered honestly. She regretted the circumstances, the pain and the damage to the family. But she did not regret drawing the line. Palace staff soon postponed several joint planning meetings because no one knew whether Camilla's office still held approval over shared projects. Then a confidential instruction settled the question. Future cooperation would require written agreement from both royal households, meaning each office had to approve responsibilities before any joint event could proceed. No one could make changes alone again. Charles returned to Clarence House later and found Camilla sitting beside the unopened reception program. The king reached toward it, hoping to begin the conversation neither of them wanted. She moved it away before he could touch it. Silence hardened between them. It might have become permanent. But Catherine returned home with a decision no one expected. That night, With the applause behind her and the anger still unresolved, she chose to approach Camilla without advisors, schedules, or royal rank between them. There was no motorcade announcement, no formal summons, and no line of courtiers waiting to record what happened. Catherine arrived privately and asked to speak with Camilla alone. The calendar remained unchanged. The authority dispute remained real. Yet the princess had not come to deepen the humiliation. She had come because victory without understanding threatened to poison the family for years. For the first time since the reception, both women faced each other without an audience and without the protection of ceremony. Camilla agreed to the meeting, but refused to receive Catherine in a formal drawing room. The queen chose a smaller private sitting room instead, removing the distance that ceremony usually created. A drawing room is a formal space used to receive guests, while the smaller room carried none of that protection. There would be no aides, no witnesses, and no carefully managed version of what either woman felt. Catherine spoke first. The princess told Camilla that the calendar removals would remain in place. She would not reverse the decision, and she would not pretend the interference had never happened. But she also said she did not want one argument to become a permanent war that would damage Charles, William, and the future of the monarchy. Camilla listened without interrupting. Then the queen admitted, through that private conversation, what she had refused to say before. She had intervened because she felt herself becoming irrelevant, as William and Catherine took on more public responsibility. Every new appearance given to the younger couple made her fear that the institution was already moving past her. Catherine did not dismiss that fear. She revealed that the interruption at St. James's Palace had made her feel something just as painful. Months of work, trust, and leadership had seemed ready to disappear beneath one claim of seniority. The princess had not heard guidance in Camilla's words. She had heard an attempt to erase her authority. Camilla finally acknowledged that contacting the event organizer had been wrong. Charles had never authorized her staff to reduce Catherine's role, and she accepted that she had allowed insecurity to become control. Catherine answered with equal honesty. The removal had never been designed to strip Camilla of royal duty. It was a boundary, drawn because trust could not survive another hidden intervention. Camilla reached for the calendar. She did not ask for her name to be restored. Instead, the queen closed it and said any future cooperation would have to begin differently. Together, they agreed that no joint engagement would be scheduled until both offices approved the responsibilities directly and in advance. The private understanding prevented a complete family rupture. But outside the palace, the missing appearances could no longer be hidden. By morning, the agreement remained secret, while the public saw only 3 cancellations, and Britain began constructing its own verdict. At sunrise, a newspaper appeared on stands with a front page that transformed a private calendar change into a national drama. Beneath 2 formal portraits ran a stark headline, "Catherine draws the line." Within hours, broadcasters were debating whether the princess had defended her office or challenged the Queen Consort. Outside Buckingham Palace, visitors gathered beneath the gates, holding phones toward the building, as though the walls themselves might reveal an answer. The monarchy's internal fracture had become public property. The palace moved quickly, but not boldly. Officials confirmed that Catherine's forthcoming engagements had been reorganized, yet they refused to describe the change as punishment or a constitutional dispute. A constitutional dispute means a conflict affecting the formal powers and structure of the monarchy. This was not presented that way. Instead, the statement called the changes a matter of scheduling and responsibility. Royal commentators were not convinced. 3 planned appearances involving Camilla had vanished at the same time, and that pattern was impossible to dismiss as routine. One leading morning broadcaster displayed the original and revised schedules side by side, and called the removals the clearest public boundary Catherine has ever drawn. The public reaction split almost instantly. Supporters of the princess praised her for protecting work created by her own team. Defenders of the Queen Consort argued that she had been humiliated in a way that damaged the dignity of the crown. Every discussion returned to the same question: had Catherine defended her authority or exposed a royal family already breaking apart? Outside Buckingham Palace, the mood became visible. A small crowd gathered near the gates, and one visitor held a handwritten sign that read, "Let them serve without fighting." The message captured the exhaustion beneath the fascination. People did not merely want drama, they wanted proof that the monarchy could still control itself. Charles watched the morning broadcast without speaking. The king remained still until commentators began speculating about his marriage. Then he asked for the television to be turned off. The silence that followed said more than any palace statement. Catherine read the newspaper headline with William beside her. The princess feared that a necessary boundary had been turned into a story of revenge. The prince reminded her that public judgment often arrived before truth, but even he knew the damage could grow. The palace finally released a formal statement confirming that joint engagements would now require approval from both royal households through a new shared procedure. Camilla authorized her office to support the announcement, signaling that she would not challenge Catherine's control over the revised program. The statement slowed the storm, but it did not end it. The public had heard the palace's explanation. Now the monarchy needed a final gesture, proving that boundaries could survive without destroying the family behind them. 1 week after Camilla's name disappeared from the calendar, Catherine stepped forward alone to lead the engagement that had triggered the dispute. She did not mention the confrontation. She did not celebrate her authority. She simply carried out the work exactly as promised. Elsewhere, the Queen Consort resumed her independent duties under a newly clarified system. No dramatic reconciliation was staged, yet a final truth had emerged. The monarchy had survived because one woman drew a boundary and another finally accepted it. Catherine led the literacy engagement without hesitation. The program succeeded. The invited organizations received the support they had been promised, and the absence of Camilla did not weaken the purpose of the day. A royal engagement is an official public duty carried out on behalf of the crown, and this one proved the removal had been practical, not personal revenge. The princess had protected the work, not damaged it. Camilla continued with her own program under the new approval process. The Queen Consort kept her position, her duties, and her public role, but she no longer attempted to control appearances organized by Catherine's office. The agreement required both households, the separate teams managing each royal's responsibilities, to approve every future shared engagement before it was announced. Respect would now move in both directions. Catherine returned to Kensington Palace and placed the completed program beside the revised calendar. William looked at both documents, then told her the event had succeeded because she refused to surrender control of work carrying her name. The prince did not praise the pain the decision caused. He praised the strength it took to hold the boundary without turning it into public cruelty. Catherine felt relief, not victory. The princess understood that leadership sometimes demands a choice that hurts people, but the purpose must be protection rather than punishment. She had defended her responsibility while still leaving space for future cooperation. Camilla reached her own conclusion. The queen recognized that seniority could not justify interference, and the exclusion became a painful lesson. Charles also accepted that defending his wife did not mean protecting her from every consequence. By refusing to overrule Catherine, the king preserved the authority of the future reign. William saw his wife differently after that week. The future king no longer viewed her only as his partner. He saw a royal leader who could make an unpopular decision, carry its emotional cost, and refuse to humiliate the person who had challenged her. The 3 removed engagements were never restored. Instead, one future joint appearance was provisionally scheduled under the new rules. Cooperation could return, but the old imbalance could not. Catherine had not removed Camilla from royal life. She had removed her from a calendar she had attempted to control. Personal rank had finally met a firm limit. And so the final judgment was unmistakable. Catherine protected her duty, Camilla accepted the boundary, Charles upheld the balance, and the monarchy moved forward, changed, bruised, but intact. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.